Folks, if you have any questions for Mayor Johnson, please text it to us at 773-763-9278. That is the number to call in or text us. And we try to keep the program very tight. Time flies on radio, folks. We have already gone through our first hour, and I don't know how time flies so fast when you are on the radio. But this is the lightning strike. We come every Sunday morning from 8 to 10. And by the way, before we started the lightning strike on WCPT, from 9 to 10 is when we first started that in the morning. Mayor Johnson had that hour. Okay, so glad to see him back. Good morning, Mayor. If you can.
Yes. Hey, good morning, everyone. It's so good to be with you all. And it's good to know that that great Sunday morning tradition of great progressive talk hosts is still alive.
Well, you started the whole thing, sir, for us on Sundays on WCPT, and I think Congresswoman Marie Newman is joining us also this morning. So I'll let Marie take the lead from here on and start talking with you. Good morning, Marie.
Good morning and good morning, Mayor. I think we have you on.
You do have me on. I'm grateful to be with you this morning. And thank you for giving me an opportunity to come back to my old stomping ground.
Indeed, indeed. And may I say, the family picture you have on your Zoom is adorable. So just look at that out of the way. Thank you for being here. Everybody knows our mayor of the city of Chicago, who started out as a commissioner, but also his original roots are in teaching, which I have to tell you, when I hear a politician starts out as a teacher, it usually makes me stand up and listen because it means that you have patience and you're good on your feet.
Marie,
So,
if you don't mind me jumping in over here, if Mayor, if you could please put up your video, we'd love to see your face, unless you haven't shaved in the morning on Sunday.
Yeah, no, I'm going to do that. I'm actually about to get into a vehicle. So I'll just bear with me.
Okay,
yeah,
Headed to my first stop.
well,
okay,
multitasking. So,
go ahead.
thank you for being here, Mayor. One of the things, and you'll find, and welcome everybody to my segment, Ignore at Your Risk. One of the things that we talk about every Sunday during my segment are things that either get ignored, don't get enough attention, are part of a bigger story, or things that sometimes good news in the news doesn't get covered. And one of the things I like to observe in our surroundings here in Illinois, but also broadly in the Midwest, are there's a lot of really good things going on in all of our cities. And I want to be clear that crime is being reduced in most of our major cities, but also in our B cities and our C cities, right? So I think overall, this is a good sign that our municipalities are doing a good job. But specifically, we've seen some good numbers in the Chicago area that I don't think get lifted up enough. And this is what the team has shared with me recently is that, it looks like in the most recent CPD, which is the Chicago Police Department stats, is that we've had a homicide reduction of 29%. Shootings have dropped 34%. Robberies have fallen about 36%, and vehicular hijackings down 50. So I am curious, and I think others are too, Mr. Mayor. What has been the reason for that? What specifically are some of the programs you're doing?
Yeah, thank you for that question. And thank you for highlighting the work that's being done around the country, where progressive leaders are driving change and transforming our cities by taking a more full force of government approach. Look, let me just start off by saying that one homicide, one shooting, one act of violence is one too many, right? Even with those numbers that, we're able to highlight for those families that have fallen victim to violence, those numbers don't necessarily bring them comfort. What we have done, though, is what we've said from the very beginning, that policing alone is not going to create safe and affordable communities. And so one of the things that we did out the gate was, one, I made a concerted effort to invest more in youth employment. Our Shy Youth Works program, no administration has hired more young people for summer jobs than my administration. I just signed an executive order to create full-time positions year-round for peacekeepers with working with Good Kids Mad City. Last summer, we hired over 31,119 young people. Again, the neighborhoods that experienced the highest level of employment saw the greatest decline in violence. Austin, in particular, where I live here on the west side of Chicago. What we also did was we invested in mental and behavioral health care. Not only have I reopened 3 mental health clinics, I've expanded the CARE program, the Crisis Assistance Response Engagement program. It's no longer a pilot. It's a citywide effort, a program that's fully funded. That in the event of a mental health crisis, a paid behavioral mental health crisis worker can assist in that crisis versus a police officer. And then that frees up police officers to confront the more violent acts that we are looking to drive down. Third, we've invested heavily in CVI, the community violence intervention workers. These are individuals who have been formerly justice involved, and now they are coming back to support the communities that they once wreaked havoc in. Where CVI is present, we have seen declines as high as 45 to 50%. And then finally, I made a promise to hire 200 more detectives. Well, we've done that. We've hired well over more than 200 detectives, and now we have a clearance rate that is higher than it's been in over a decade, 72 to 75% clearance rate, so that if a violent act does occur, whether it's homicide or shooting, we hold those individuals accountable because that serves as a deterrent. So it's policing and mental and behavioral health care services. It's policing and youth employment. It's policing and community violence intervention work. And all of that working together, where we've revamped our detectives bureau, where there's stronger communication within our police department. Again, last year we had the fewest amount of homicides in 60 years.
Yeah. And that's all good news. So, you raised a great point. So those families that have lost their babies, right? It's not great comfort. And there is now a perception, and we can scream about this all day long, right? I find this is so fascinating to me, Mayor, and I want your specific take on it. I'll be talking to someone who is predisposed that Chicago is riddled with crime, or is predisposed that all of the businesses left, or is predisposed that there is violence in our neighborhoods every minute of every day. And I just had this in my home recently. I had this discussion. I live in the suburbs. Many friends from the city come and visit. I'm in a near suburb. And they'll say, well, it's still just riddled with crime and it's so bad and blah, 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 blah. And, when you share those statistics with them, it is really hard to get, and these are really smart people, right?
Mm-hmm.
So what do you recommend? It's like, how do we talk about this in a way where, it's a combination of fact and story, right? Is that,
Mm-hmm.
so I would love some advice on this. How do how do you talk about this?
Yeah, well, look, I mean, as I said before, violence has not been eradicated from the earth, right? We're
Yeah.
seeing extreme violence as war is being promulgated across the globe, right? And so we've seen many different acts of violence. And so I'll say it the way Reverend Jackson would say it to me. And
Mhm.
when I was organizing, he would say, you have to say it to them as if it's the first time they've ever heard it. And, if you think about Reverend Jackson, keep hope alive. I am somebody, right? I mean, until his last breath, he
Yep.
was telling people as if it was the first time they've heard it. And here's the thing: reducing violence and crime in Chicago is not just simply about statistics and data. It's about what we are filling these communities with. Absent the affordable housing effort, you can look outside your home and it still reflects and mimics what violence looks like, right? That's why I've invested more in our education system. I think it's about talking about what else we're doing and not just simply about what we are trying to remove.
Mhm.
Look, last year, something else, Maria, you could say Marie, sorry, that last summer we had more people visit our city than any other time in the history of Chicago. We had 3.5 million visitors over the summer. If Chicago was just this place riddled with violence, How are we leading with population growth? There's no major city right now that is experiencing population growth. They're either declining or remaining flat. Our airport is the busiest in the entire world, right? And so I think it's also talking about the fact that, again, we released the largest tip surplus back into our schools, parks, and libraries than any other administration. So when you're talking about safety and you're talking about community safety in particular, it's not just about the absence of violence. It's about what we are replenishing our community with.
Yeah, it is this combination of story, fact, and just having the experience and giving it a try, right? I keep telling them, I said, how about if you go and walk around a little bit? How about that crazy idea, Speaking of which, had a good friend come into town. We were in Pilsen and then we for dinner, and then we were also the next day on Michigan Avenue because she absolutely had to go on Michigan Avenue. That was her thing, right? So I said, okay. And so she made an interesting comment unprovoked. And so I want you to talk about this a little bit. She said, and it's not a great statement, but I think it shares how people are starting to feel. It's like, oh, Michigan Avenue isn't as desolate as I thought it was going to be. I was like, okay, that's not great, but it's better than.
What do you know?
It was comparative in value, right? So and Michigan Avenue means nothing. It's the smallest part of our business district, really. But like it is a kind of a centerpiece, right?
Mhm.
So use that as an example, and maybe one other neighborhood. Choose, I don't know, Ravenswood or something. Choose two business districts and tell me how things are changing and why factually they're changing.
Yeah, well, first of all, that's a great anecdote there. I mean, honestly, to just kind of hear that perspective where folks are like, it's not as bad as they thought. Because listen, we have our challenges, but we're not falling apart here. In fact, Chicago is the top destination for corporate relocation
Mhm.
anywhere. We've been voted the best big city in America by Condé Nast 8, 9 years in a row. Again, 13 years in a row for corporate relocation. One of the things that we are doing downtown that's unique to the other 76 neighborhoods is that we are converting old office buildings into housing and affordable housing, right? Because our economy has shifted and changed. The pandemic has proven that. And so now some of these boutique shops are now exclusively online. But there are more folks that are coming back downtown. If you look at Foundry Park, for instance, this is the Lincoln Yards that sat desolate through multiple administrations. 9,000 units are going to be built there, right? And that's all privately funded. That's not even government assistance. Same thing on the south in the 78, that's that desolate. We're building a brand new football stadium there. In America, we call it soccer, right? So we can build stadiums and do it in a responsible way. And
Right.
so I think the way we talk about what's unique to Michigan Avenue or other parts of the city is that business and residential coexist, right? And so when you talk about Argyle, or if you're up in, Rogers Park, where you see strong business communities, but you
Mhm.
also have a dense population there, right? And I know that's going to trigger some of my Northsiders because I know parking is a big deal up there, but it's also a sign that you can have economic development and housing coexist. That's what's unique in this moment. I think that's what your friend is recognizing, that we are repopulating these districts with not just business and commercial development. And the last thing that I'll say, we're doing this through our $1.25 billion economic bond. It's the largest economic bond in the history of Chicago to build housing and to invest in our small businesses. We've invested in my first 3 years, Marie, almost $700 million into small businesses, right? Again, going back to downtown tourism last year, almost $1 billion of new revenue into our economy because folks are coming back through our communities, and they're not just going downtown, to your point, because that is not even, you think about Little Village, you think about Bronzeville, right over here on the west side where there's more economic development happening along Chicago Avenue. So that's the unique thing in this moment, is that we are blending the small business economic development with building housing, including affordable homes, of which 20%, 30% of the homes that we are building downtown will be affordable. So a security guard and someone who cleans the windows can actually live in the neighborhood that they're working in.
You know, I hear every day when I'm talking, particularly to young people between, and you know what I'm going to say, is between, say 20 and 34. They certainly can't afford their home. The average age of the first time homeowner has gone up to 40 in our nation. It's a little higher actually in the Chicago metropolitan area, which includes the suburbs. And so young people tell me every day, that's great that you're building some homes, Mr. Mayor, but like, what are you going to do to the affordability, the current affordability crisis with existing homes? Tell us
Yeah.
a little bit about that.
Yeah, look, that's a big deal. The home that my wife and I are raising our family in on the west side of Chicago, this was during the economic downturn. And we were able to purchase our home, through a short sale, but someone else lost their property.
Mhm.
But we still needed two government assistant programs to help us purchase this home. At that time, it was $150,000, right? And now the average price of a home roughly between 275 and 350
Yeah.
here in Chicago. Now, in New York, it's 1.1 million is the average price of a home. In Los Angeles, it's 900,000, and that's for a fixer-upper that's about 900 square feet. And so one of the things that we're doing in Chicago is through our green social housing, which was a campaign promise, where we're going to build homes using a revolving loan of the economic bond that will pay for the housing that we will build. And of course, it will be sustainable because it's also about controlling the cost of not just building, but for utility, right? Many families are struggling not only to pay their mortgage, but to make sure that their utility bills are under control. But we're also really investing in what it's called the missing middle. It's the first of its kind in Chicago where we're building owner occupied homes. So not just single family homes, but three flats, multi units where an owner can live in one level and then rent out the other two. So we can build at scale while also creating generational wealth. And we're using, of course, developers of color, women to help infuse this. The last thing is through many organizations, the city of Chicago is selling vacant lots to developers for essentially a dollar. We're working to help with some of the environmental mitigation there so that we can build more of units at scale, because that's really the answer. The more units we build, and we're on pace to build over 10,000 by the end of next year. We just invested another $300 million in 15 affordable housing projects across the city. And because it's been neglected for so long, the demand is significant. The need, of course, is there. And now it's a matter of moving government expeditiously to meet that demand. But we're building and we're building at scale.
Good. Um, the affordability crisis hits everybody. Every day they walk out and they feel it. In their homes, they feel it everywhere. Um, as we move towards the your big race, right? I will preface this by saying that being a mayor in any size town, whether it's teeny tiny like my 15,000 person town, or a city of nearly 3 million like yourself, being the mayor is the convergence of everything, is that healthcare, housing, safety, and business all converge together, and everybody's thinking about it every day. As you move in as the incumbent, what will be your primary message going into this 2027 race?
Yeah, look, I think you, Maria, have already alluded to it. My goal is to build the safest, most affordable big city in America.
Mhm.
Because for me, to live in a community that you feel safe in, but you can't afford to live in it, that doesn't solve, right? But you can afford to live in a community and not feel safe. That's also is equally problematic. And so that's why, going into this, next season and going into the summer months, we're going to continue to double down on our efforts to build more affordable units, working with community partners to help us engineer at a faster pace housing. We just passed a couple of months ago the ability to expand ADUs. So this is a big deal for homeowners who may have a relative, a child, an aging parent that can live with them while creating wealth essentially and protecting affordability. And then of course, still doing all that we can to keep people safe. There's there's a lot to be desired, of course, over 30 plus years of malfeasance and disinvestment, right? We've seen school closings, we've seen mental health clinics shut down, public housing has been, shuttered. The ultra rich, of course, and big corporations continue to receive tax breaks and loopholes. And so when we talk about building the safest, most affordable big city in America, that happens when we invest in people. And the best way to invest in people is to challenge the ultra rich and these big corporations to pay their fair share in taxes.
Awesome. I'm glad to hear about the ADUs. So listeners, if you don't know what an ADU is, do a little Googling. It's assisted dwelling units. It's a way multi-generational families can support each other in their wealth journey. And actually, there's a good bit of it already going on the Southwest side. I have many friends in Archer Heights and places like that that are already doing this to great success. It can be done. So if the city can support it, that's great. One final challenge, and this is a big one, and we want to hear back. Where I'm going to have you do some homework, Mayor.
Okay. All right.
I would like your administration to think through a report that shares on all of these things that comes out in a meaningful way and in a relevant way to young people, folks that are, midlife and older in the city, but then also in other places too. So it's like an ambassador report that shares in very specific stories why these things you're doing are successful and what your administration is doing is successful. And obviously, print is great, but digital is way better. And so I'm going to challenge your organization to do something like that and get it out in the next few months because all of these things you shared with me sound great. And we've got some good statistics going. Nobody's making the connection. I'm just being honest with you.
Yeah.
So I'm going to challenge your administration to some homework and I'd love to see it. I won't grade it, but I would like to see it.
Well, I think it's a healthy challenge. That's why these conversations are important in the fast age of the digital age. It's important that people know what and why we are doing it. I mean, government continues to be redefined, and I believe ensuring that people have a seat and a view of the table. I agree with you. I think that it makes for a better engagement.
All right. Well, Mr. Mayor, I'm going to let you get back to your business. We went a minute over your time. So have a great day. And will you come back soon?
I most certainly will. Thank you.
All right. Take care.
All right. Bye-bye.
Bye.